is, because if we're saying it's a lyric, well, why? How is it a lyric, right? So let's say, for example, which aspect of this information here relates to London?
The poet's emotion and personal experiences.
So you say poet's emotions. Okay, cool. How does that relate?
It relates because, hey,
Hi, how you doing? You okay?
yeah, you.
Yeah, good. Not bad. Not bad. How are we getting on?
I finished the poetry redraft, but can you go through with me because I haven't done it with the tutor yet?
Oh, okay, let's have a look. Have you not started on the notes or those things yet?
I have taken two poems for the notes, and then I am starting the creative writing because I need to finish it.
Which redraft is it? Is it oppression or
Yeah,
so do you want to quickly tell me like what you found in terms of strengths and weaknesses?
because I got full marks on it, and it doesn't really tell me like what I can improve more, so I'm kind of stuck.
Oh, well, if it's got full marks, it gets harder and harder to improve it the higher up you get. So, I mean, that's kind of like the point, though, isn't it? So let's just check. Because look, just think about it like this, right? I was thinking about this after the session that we did on Saturday, the live modeling session. And I was thinking about it because let's say students like at a grade three, right? If you're at a grade three, what that means is you need to make major fundamental changes to your writing. You're going to have to learn how to restructure your whole writing, your paragraphs, everything's going to have to change, right? Once you get into the grade sevens, then it doesn't become about big changes anymore. It becomes more about refining. And the closer you get to the grade nine, the more it becomes about those little details. And the closer you get to 100%, again, it's just fine little details that you can be looking at. So it's probably not going to be anything major that you're looking at the moment. It's probably just going to be little things. And if you score 100%, you're really just nitpicking at that point. You're just finding things to be like, well, we could improve this, we could improve that. You know what I mean? So what can you nitpick about on in your own essay?
I feel like sometimes I might use too much the or this for like the opening of the sentences, but I
Hmm.
actually have no idea what words I should use instead of it.
Okay, let's see.
Because like
So
when I say the techniques, I always say the simile, like suggest something something, or like this quote something something. I don't know
mm,
how to like rephrase it to not put the or this.
let's just check, right? So if I search it and I type in the when it's in the middle of the sentence, it's okay, but you've got one there, one there, one there, one there. Yeah, so you have got quite a few. One there, one there, one there, one there. Yeah, so there are quite a few of them. It's quite tricky. For example, with the Macbeth booklet that I made, yeah, it's one of the things that actually took me so long was actually just getting rid of the version that this is. So let's just have a look, right? What about here, for example, right? Is it absolutely necessary that you have to say the forms? Isn't there another way we can start that sentence?
I don't know.
You must be able to think of another way, surely.
Can I say like both forms?
You could say that, yeah.
But if I'm
Uh,
not like really used to it, then in exams I'm going to have to like think for so long to like how to start the
that's the
sentence.
danger, yes. That is the danger. Look, like I said, if you write that in an exam, you score grade nine still. Okay. I'm just saying if you do want it to be a little bit better, then this is the other way to do it, right? So you could say something like this. So you could say both London and the Prelude's forms are instrumental in how Blake and Wordsworth convey the persistent presence of oppression. So here, nice start, right? Blake's quatrain form in London. It's actually a lyric. It's actually a lyric. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to put here lyric quatrain form in London creates a sense of restriction and order that mirrors the oppressive societal structures of the Industrial Revolution. Yeah,
Wait, so
so
if
okay,
like four
yeah,
lines per stanza, is it like a structure instead of a form?
that's the structure. Yeah, exactly, right. So the form in terms of the lyric, the thing about the lyric is it's emotional and it tends to have a musical quality to it. It's very emotional type of poem. It tends to have a musical quality to it. You know, like lyric, it's like, you know what I mean? Like lyrics
Yeah.
to a song, that sort of thing, right? Um, and it is in that poetry notes document. Remember, unit one, lesson.
Yeah.
It's in there. It explains it in there. Check the poetry notes. In fact, did you put it inside your tracker?
Yeah, I did.
Check it in there.
Yeah, because I looked at it before, and I think there's like a whole page on every poem and like every form and structure that it
Yeah,
used.
yes, there is. So let's have a look here. It says the lyric form of poetry is a short, expressive style of poetry that conveys the poet's emotions, thoughts, or personal experiences, right? So you know what I do, right? When I'm reading this type of stuff, I'm trying to think to myself, how does this relate to the poem that I'm studying? Not everything is always going to be relevant all the time, you know what I mean? But there's going to be some stuff that is lyric. Well, why? How is it a lyric, right? So let's say, for example, which aspect of this information here relates to London?
The poet's emotion and personal experiences.
So you say poet's emotions. Okay, cool. How does that relate?
It relates because, can I say because it is it uses first person narrative, so um it shows a deep link between the poet and his experiences about the oppression that's happening inside the society.
Yes. Explain this a bit more. Why is this key, personal experiences? Why is that key in that poem? Think about it. Personal experiences, right?
Yeah.
So how does that relate to the poem? I know I'm asking a big, wide open question, but I'm doing it on purpose because otherwise if I tell you, we'll just arrive straight at the answer, but I want you to try and think about it. It's an autobiographical poem. You know what that means?
No.
It means that he's actually writing about his actual real life experiences. When it comes to poetry, just be careful. The poets not always talk about themselves. They're not always all their experiences. Sometimes they're just imagining an experience, right? So a lot of the poems are from an imagined perspective. In fact, I think the vast majority of them are probably from an imagined perspective. I think only a few of them are autobiographical, but this one is autobiographical in the sense that he is actually writing about what he actually thought about London, what he actually experienced. You get what I'm saying, right? So biography is about somebody's life. If it's autobiographical, it means that the person's writing about their own life. If it's biographical, it means that somebody's writing about somebody else's life. If it's autobiographical, they're writing about their own lives, right? So it is actually about his own experiences. Okay, so that's one thing that you can talk about there. And you can talk about how, like you said, it creates a really deep personal connection for him. Unlike narrative poetry, which tells a story, lyric poetry focuses primarily on the expression of feelings and reflections. Yes, so the poem is expressing his own deep feelings about London during the Industrial Revolution. And then you can talk about how that is rooted in the Romantic movement, because he was a Romantic poet, right? Do you know what romantic means in this sense? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can you explain?
Is it like when the poets they talk about their own emotions on something?
Romantic? No. Like we're talking about the Romantic movement, which is I think was what late 1700s to the late 1800s, somewhere around there. I can't actually remember the exact date. So the Romantic movement, not in the sense of like love, but the Romantic movement was focused on nature.
And like,
why were they focused on nature? Well, what was it about nature that they were so concerned about?
because of like the Industrial Revolution and like
Bingo.
everything's like machinery and stuff.
Exactly. So they were concerned about the destruction of nature because of the Industrial Revolution, the mechanization of the world, right? So you started to have a situation where London was notoriously smoke-ridden. It still is today. London is still, I think a few years ago, London was the most polluted city in Europe, I think, as far as I remember. When the UK was still part of the EU had like a certain quota of how much pollution you could emit per year. London used to break it within the first month. Like by January, they'd already broken the limit. It's crazy. I shouldn't laugh because it's really bad. Obviously, it's way better than it was back then, but you'd have to imagine back then, it was literally like black smoke everywhere, right? And so these poets were writing about that. And then on top of the destruction of nature, the mechanization of the world. On top of that, you had, well, I guess what you could really just call the enslavement of humanity. If you weren't one of the rich and powerful people that owned one of these factories, you were a slave, even if you're a little child. That's what Dickens writes about. He writes about children being used as labor, even like 4 years old. 4 years old, you get to work 16 hours a day. That's what they're writing about. See what I'm saying, right? And so that's what it's about. It's like it's this deep emotion about these things that these people were seeing, and it's just like, man, what's going on in this world? So do you get what I'm saying about trying to relate it to like the form to the themes in the story, in the poem, right? Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here you could say, to illustrate. So I think when you're thinking about, like, when you're saying, for example, you're not sure, what phrases and stuff to use, just start off like at a basic level. You can just use discourse markers. Therefore, consequently, to illustrate, for example, however, consequently, blah, blah, blah. Just use discourse markers. Okay. But sometimes you can even just make up a phrase just to transition, right? So if we listen to the sound now, so this one says, both London and the Preludes forms are instrumental in how Blake and Wordsworth convey the persistent presence of oppression. You could say this: their respective authors, Blake and Wordsworth, convey the persistent presence of oppression. To illustrate, Blake's lyric quatrain form in London creates a sense of restriction and order that mirrors the oppressive societal structures of the Industrial Revolution. And we can say, for example, you see, all I'm actually just using discourse markers now. For example, the repetition of the charted in the quote, I wandered through every charted street near where the charted Thames doth flow. Cool. That is slightly long, that quote. It's not bad, but it's a bit long. So here, the repetition of charted, I wandered through each charted street, underscores the pervasive control and lack of freedom, reflecting the psychological and physical constraints imposed on individuals, especially the working class. How? So you're saying, so listen, yeah? So it says, for example, the repetition of charted in the quote, I wander through each charted street. Yeah, how does it reflect?
But is it better if I talk about like the nature also being like controlled?
Have you got a quote for it?
No, this quote. Because it has like river themes as well.
Yeah. Yes, you can. Yes. Yeah. I forgot about that. You can do that.
Yeah. Also, sometimes I'm just a little bit confused because for like those alternative interpretations, I don't really know what counts as alternative interpretations.
Well, what does it mean though, alternative interpretations?
Because sometimes, like, in Scrooge, for like solitary as an oyster, like for the alternative interpretation, it is a pearls found inside an oyster. So like it foreshadows Scrooge's change later in the novella. But like I know this is an alternative interpretation because it's like completely different from like what I did. But then sometimes my teachers said it doesn't have to be like the opposite of what you said for alternative interpretations.
It just has to be different. But also remember that alternative interpretations are not, I wouldn't say they're absolutely necessary all the time. So if you can't think of one, just don't worry about it, because actually alternative interpretation is actually part of AO3. And AO3, remember that, because I say AO3 is historical context, but that's only because I want you guys to learn about historical context, because it makes your arguments more solid. That's all. However, you can actually score AO3 by giving alternative interpretations. So if you've written about historical context, you don't actually need alternative interpretations. If you can do it, great, it's more marks. Okay. But if you've already written a good amount of historical context, you've got your AO3. So even if, for example, in my entire essay, even if I've only got one alternative interpretation or two, it's probably enough. Because you remember the structure of the essays forces you to score AO3 with historical context anyway. So you're scoring in that aspect anyway. So I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay.
But in terms of alternative interpretations, it's just for example, so solitary as an oyster. So you might say, on the one hand, the imagery of the oyster may be symbolic of Scrooge's harder outer shell, because an oyster has an outer shell. So this perhaps symbolizes Scrooge's harsh exterior that he, portrays in a society. And so we can understand from that perspective. And let's be honest, like you might even say, additionally, oysters, the shells are not so beautiful from the outside. They're very rough, they're hard, they're not that attractive. And then you say, alternatively, however, we may also interpret that because when we open an oyster, we may find a pearl inside. This could suggest that the same is the same for Scrooge, that if he does open up, that we may find some beautiful qualities within Scrooge himself as well, just like we may find in an oyster. So I'm saying, so there, I could actually just do it as one interpretation, or I can split it up into two. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
But I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think even if you've got one or two per essay, I think it's fine. But because I get you guys to focus more on historical context for AO3, but you don't need to necessarily do alternative interpretations. I would recommend it if you can, but I wouldn't say it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, okay.
So I think it's good. I think it's fine. But yeah, I mean, just going through this, you see, all I'm really doing is I'm really just adding discourse markers. But can you see it's just adding a little bit more quality to it? I don't know if you can see it or not. So I'll read the first bit. So it says, both London and the Preludes forms are instrumental in how their respective authors, Blake and Wordsworth, convey their persistent presence of oppression. To illustrate, Blake's lyric quatrain form in London creates a sense of restriction and order that mirrors the oppressive societal structures of the Industrial Revolution. That's really good. For example, the repetition of charted in the quote, I wander through each charted street near where the charted Thames doth flow, underscores the pervasive control and lack of freedom, reflecting the psychological. Yeah, I think it's better if you talk about the control of nature there. I think that'll be better. And then, what you can do here, right? Instead of saying this structured form, right? You could leave it like that if you want. That could be your one allowance of the word this. That's what I do. I allow myself to start a sentence with the or this once. That's what I do. In each paragraph, I can do it once. That's it. Okay, so you could do that as your allowance of the one. Or you could say, moreover, Blake's, and then we get rid of the word this. Bingo. Okay. Moreover, Blake's structured form evokes frustration.
Yeah.
Easy peasy. Yeah. I think the answer to your question is just using discourse markers. I think that's it.
Yeah, I feel like I should focus more on like discourse markers when I write because I always forgot about them.
I think it's one of the last things that's remaining to just really polish off your writing. It's one of the final things if you want to really polish your writing and just make it like really nice. Oh yeah, and even here, for example, your transition, right? So when you start your thesis statement, instead of saying this essay will compare, you might say something like, having established these contextual factors, the following essay will explore. Because if you think about it,
That's really top tier.
Sorry?
That sounds really top tier, like language.
Yeah, but it's not that difficult if you think about it. It's not anything special. It's just like, having established these factors, the following essay will explore. But can you see the difference here? Because if you see, for example, you're talking about the romantic movement, etc., and then it just goes, this essay will explore. Can you see? It's just a bit of a jump, that's all. Can you see?
Yeah.
It's a small change that makes a big difference in the feeling of the writing. Right. And actually, to be honest, it's not just about the feeling, but it's also, do you know what the actual technical function of a discourse marker is?
I only know that it helps with like the cohesion.
It does
like,
actually.
The whole
I mean,
essay.
what does that mean, cohesion? What does it mean?
It provides like a smooth link from one sentence to another sentence.
Yes, it actually, more than that, it actually provides a logical link. So what you're telling the reader is, this is the relation of this coming up sentence to the previous one, right? So here, for example, okay, fine, I haven't used a discourse marker. I've used a transitional phrase, right? So you can either use a discourse marker or a transitional phrase. Sometimes you can just make up a phrase that transitions, right? But what I'm saying here is that, look, now that I've given you these ideas, we've established these factors, I'm going to build on this by exploring this thing and this thing and this thing, right? And then here, for example, I'm explaining something here. You're explaining something here. And then we're saying, okay, as an example of that thing I've just explained, here's this thing which explains it a bit further, right? And now I'm explaining something else. And then to build on top of that, I'm going to also then explain this other thing. And then sometimes, so for example, here, excellent. So I was just about to say it. Sometimes you want to say, but from another point of view, if we look at this in a different way, or if we look at the situation in a different way, we have this other thing we can explore, which is basically what you're saying here in contrast. So what you're saying is, even though we've looked at those things, there's another thing that we can look at here, right? See what I'm saying, right? So sometimes we're going to add on top, sometimes we're going to give an example, and then sometimes we're going to contrast it, just like what you've done there. And that's all you have to really think about. But it is in the toolkit in the library. These things are in the toolkit in the library. Or you can just I guess you can just look them up as well. That library.
Yeah, I saw them in the library because I saw instead of using it shows use other words, like I've seen that. And I've used it in my essay as well. It sounds so much better.
It does. It's so much better. Oh my gosh. You know, when I first started teaching, there was one of the first things I noticed about so many essays. Everybody just goes shows. Everything you read, this shows. It's like, guys, please. Like, I got so sick of it. I started banning students from using it. I'm like, nobody's allowed to use this word anymore. Even me, I don't use it anymore. I don't use it because I'm like, this word is so boring, you know. And you know what? Again, it's not just that it's boring. It's inaccurate. It's inaccurate because if you think about it, right? Depending on the technique that the author is doing, sometimes they're illustrating, sometimes they're emphasizing, sometimes they're highlighting, sometimes they're demonstrating. Though each word is specific. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. I think honestly, like your writing is really good overall. Really, really good. I think if you really want to polish it off, just work through your discourse markers, right? So I would write that down here. So 3 things you can write down: transitioning your sentences with discourse markers and transitional phrases. Maybe just learning a little bit more about the forms and thinking about how the characteristics of the forms relate to the specific poems or text that you're reading. Let's say text because it's, the specific text or poems that you're reading. What else?
Maybe I can learn more about the forms, like different forms and how it links to the poems.
Yeah, you can do that. And another thing you can do is make sure that when you use a discourse marker, that they specifically illustrate the relationship between the 2 sentences. So what that means is that you've got to be careful which discourse markers you actually use. It has to illustrate the relationship between the different sentences. Cool. Do you want me to sign it off for you?
Yes, please.
Yeah. It's really good though. I think if you just do those things, it'll be like it'll really nicely polished. All right?
Yeah.
Should we call it night?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just read through the model answers as well for Macbeth, yeah? Like read 1 answer a day, I'd advise you.
I did. I think I printed out all of them and then I highlighted each AO1 and AO2 and AO3. So because last time for the ending spectacles, I did the same thing, even though I forgot what I got in my marks, but then I did the same thing and I kind of found out the patterns of how to write something. So I just tried to use it in my exam and all of the things that I remembered from the model essays, I all got really good responses from the teacher.
That's exactly what it's meant to be. We've had students in the past who the main thing they did was actually just read model answers and just really study them, and they come out with grade 7s, grade 8s from grade 3s. You know, that girl last year, I still don't know how she did it, if I'm honest with you. There was a girl last year, she went from grade 2 to grade 8. I still don't really know how she did that because she only submitted 1 piece of writing. So I think what she did was she probably spent a lot of time with the model answers. I was just I was dreading, and I was thinking, I swear her dad's going to text me and he's going to be so upset. I was thinking she's not going to get the grades. and she got a grade 8. I was like, how? So I think that's what she did. I think that's what she did. And we had another boy as well called Yusuf, and he was really struggling as well. He was like scoring like grade 3s. And then it was a bit of a struggle with him at the beginning. It was like really difficult to get him going. And then all of a sudden he started reading the model answers and his grades just started picking up like crazy. And then he was like, oh, I get it, just from studying the model answers. So it's really, really important what you're doing, going through them. It is what you're meant to be doing. It's very, very powerful going through model answers. It's such a quick way of transforming your grades if you really understand what they're doing. So yeah, just keep doing it. Try and aim for that grade 9, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. Anything else you want me to go over?
No, I don't think so.
Oh.